Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Bai Xiaochun? Scared? Feeling very pleased with himself, Bai Xiaochun tried as much as possible to flaunt his veins of steel, as if the slightest word of provocation would cause him to throw all caution to the wind and fight it out to the death with his enemies. The shocking result of him throwing out so many soul convergence pills led to more silence as virtually all of the skin flayers on top of the wall looked over at Bai Xiaochun, their jaws hanging open and their eyes shining with ardor. Even Zhao Tianzhao could barely breathe. His words earlier had been casually spoken, and he had never imagined that Bai Xiaochun would react the way he did. With the mere wave of his hand, he eradicated a huge number of vengeful souls. He wasn't the only one. In addition to the skin flayers in the area, someone had been watching unseen from the huge coffin off in the distance. That gaze seemed to be completely fixed on Bai Xiaochun for a long moment before retracting back into the coffin. "I've gone through just about everything you can imagine," Bai Xiaochun declared. "Back when the Spirit Stream sect and the Bloodstream sect were about to go to war, I was the one who single-handedly stopped it. After the sects joined forces, we went on to subjugate the entire cultivation world of the lower reaches." Looking off into the distance, he tried to look as heroic as possible. "Later on, I charged into battle with 1,000,000 other cultivators, including those from the Pill and Profound Stream divisions. In fact, I was the one who came up with the name of the River-Defying sect." As he swished his sleeve, the wind blew his hair, making him seem even more impressive than before. "When the River-Defying sect fought the Sky River Court, I led the charge, cutting down countless enemies. I even took control of the body of the Blood Ancestor to fight the Sky River Court's reserve power, the dire Sky Banyan. Fellow Taoist Li, now do you understand why I wasn't very shocked by the sight of the battlefield earlier? On my path of cultivation, I've already experienced far too many wars." There was a tenacity visible in Bai Xiaochun's expression, and something in his eyes that seemed both profound and ancient. Because of that, he seemed more than ever like he had veins of steel, and lacked any fear of death. Anyone who saw him at this moment would be shocked, and even Li Hongming was panting a bit. These weren't stupid people, none of them knew Bai Xiaochun, and since this was their first time meeting him, he seemed completely and utterly impressive. Plus, his soul convergence pill truly had shaken the entire battlefield, and left everyone's mind spinning. On the battlefield beyond the Great Wall, the savages were trembling in fear, and none of them even dared to advance. As for the remaining vengeful souls, they were already backing up. "Xiaochun, elder brother really misjudged you," Zhao Tianzhao said, sounding a bit self-reproaching. Thinking back to everything that had occurred since he had met Bai Xiaochun, he quickly clasped hands and bowed apologetically. Letting his sleeve drop, Bai Xiaochun lowered his voice and said, "It's no matter. Elder brother, you're not the first person to assume that I, Bai Xiaochun, am afraid of death. And the truth is that I actually do fear dying. But the reason is that I fear dying for no reason, and fear that my life will be devoid of a future." At the moment he felt wonderful, and couldn't help but muse that the events just now would ensure that in the future, no one would ever dare to say that he was scared of fighting in battle. "Xiaochun," Zhao Tianzhao said, shivering a bit. "I understand your sentiments, elder brother Zhao," Bai Xiaochun replied, "so there's no need to speak them aloud. Fellow Taoist Li, the battle is not over yet. I suggest you issue orders to take advantage of the opportunity I've won you, before it fades away." Li Hongming looked deeply at Bai Xiaochun, and without saying a single word, waved his hand toward the battlefield outside the Great Wall. The magical cannons on the Great Wall rumbled to life, sending beams of destructive light out into the enemy forces, and at the same time, large numbers of cultivators flew into the air, unleashing divine abilities and magical techniques in a riot of colors. Soon, rumbling sounds filled the air. The vengeful souls struggled to fight back, but Bai Xiaochun continued to throw out soul convergence pills, making it impossible for them to rally together. As a result, they continued to fall back across the battlefield. Bangs rang out one after another as he tossed numerous medicinal pills out. One 300-meter area after another was opened up, and the seemingly endless tide of souls was finally being beaten back. Miserable shrieks and blood-curdling screams rang out without end. As the tide of souls shrank, the beasts and the savages had no cover, and were unable to defend themselves against the blasts of the magical weapons. Soon, they were being cut down like chaff, with the survivors devolving into sheer madness. Savages relied on vengeful souls for almost everything, and using them as cannon fodder to charge the Great Wall was one of the primary tactics of the Wildlands forces. But now, that tactic was completely useless. Hearts trembling, the savages finally realized that too many strange things were occurring in this battle, and that they had no chance of surviving. Having no other choice, they began to retreat. Before, it had seemed the battle would last until night fell, but as of this moment, evening hadn't even fallen, and it was already concluding. The skin flayers almost couldn't believe what was happening. In all their years fighting savages and vengeful souls, they had never experienced anything like this. As the Wildlands forces retreated, Li Hongming clasped hands and bowed to Bai Xiaochun. "Many thanks for your help in this battle, fellow Taoist Bai," he said sincerely. The Great Wall was designed as a defensive barrier, so unless dire circumstances presented themselves, the cultivators wouldn't go beyond its bounds for protracted lengths of time. Therefore, it wasn't just Li Hongming who turned to bow to Bai Xiaochun, all of the skin flayers in the area who had stayed behind also joined in. "There's no need to thank me," Bai Xiaochun said somberly. "I do everything for the heaven-span river and sea, for my comrades in arms, and for my sect. If anything, I should be thanking you. Without your year-round service here on the wall, where could any of us safely practice cultivation? Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Taoists, thank you, all of you." With that, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. His words were spoken with a sincerity and deep emotion that touched the hearts of all present, and caused them to approve of Bai Xiaochun even more than before. As for Li Hongming, he laughed heartily and then said, "Brother Zhao. Brother Bai, come, come. I will personally arrange for a feast so that we can eat and drink to our heart's content." With that, he smiled and led the way off of the Great Wall. His attitude was completely different this time around. Along the way, he passionately introduced the various areas of Great Wall City, and even told them some things he knew about the Wildlands. Instead of taking them to an inn, he led them to his own personal residence. There, his maidservants laid out a huge feast, and they began to socialize and eat. "Brother Zhao, if you go outside the Great Wall, you will be completely surrounded by danger. I know that you have an impressive background, but you still have to watch out for yourself. Here, take this jade slip. These are all the maps I've collected during my years doing missions outside. Perhaps they will be of some use." After handing over the jade slip, he raised his cup in a toast to Zhao Tianzhao. "Many thanks," Zhao Tianzhao said, nodding his head somberly as he accepted the jade slip and drank with Li Hongming. "Brother Bai, I'm sure you have grand aspirations of your own that you will be pursuing, but no matter what happens, if you need help in any aspect, just say the word and I'll be there." From the sincere way Li Hongming looked at Bai Xiaochun, it seemed that he really did approve of him, and even wanted to be friends. Instead of responding with words, Bai Xiaochun simply raised his drinking vessel and took a long drink. Then the three of them all joined together in a round of contented laughter. Chen Yushin remained off to the side, watching them with a smile and occasionally refilling their drinking vessels. Time passed, and soon it was late in the night. The three young men were all core formation cultivators, and were sincerely interested in being friends. Their conversation flowed naturally, and they even exchanged some tips about puzzling cultivation problems. Overall, it was a very beneficial conversation for all of them. Eventually, the sky began to grow light, and Zhao Tianzhao put down his drinking vessel. Eyes shining, he rotated his cultivation base to dispel the effects of the alcohol, and then rose to his feet. "Xiaochun, Brother Li, it's time for me to take my leave. I hope that when I return, the three of us can once again eat and drink together." With that, he clasped hands in farewell. Next, Bai Xiaochun and Li Hongming watched as Zhao Tianzhao and Chen Yushin went to say their farewells to their friends and followers at the other table. Then they left the courtyard, escorted by some of the skin flayers to leave the Great Wall and head into the Wildlands. Their friends and followers all went their own separate ways. "Stay safe on your travels, elder brother Zhao," Bai Xiaochun murmured as he watched them leave. In his heart, he truly admired Zhao Tianzhao, both for his cultivation base and his temperament. He even felt a bit of an impulse to follow him out into the Wildlands. However, he managed to quickly suppress that terrifying impulse before it could do anything. Elder brother Zhao has his path, and I have my own road to follow. Taking a deep breath, he lifted his drinking vessel and drained of the last bit of alcohol. "My road leads back to East Sea City," he thought. "I'll find somewhere there to spend a few years, and then decide what to do. I definitely don't want to stay in this crappy place for any longer than I have to." Fully convinced that this was the right course of action, he rose to his feet to bid farewell to Li Hongming. "Brother Bai, I know that you're anxious to be on your way, and I don't have much time on my hands either. I have some orders to carry out, and hope that we can meet again soon in the future. And now, let me escort you to the side gate." With that, he led the way toward one of the side gates of Great Wall City. As they walked along, the bright, morning sun shone down to light their path. Bai Xiaochun would occasionally look out at the sky which hung over the area outside the Great Wall, and send his well wishes in the direction of Zhao Tianzhao and Chen Yushan. Before long, they were at the side gate. All he had to do was walk outside, and then he could return along the path he'd traveled to come here. Turning to Li Hongming, he sighed and said, "Brother Li, if we're connected by destiny, then we'll meet again." Li Hongming hesitated for a moment, then said, "Xiaochun, you know, I really feel like this is the best place for you. Why don't you think about joining the Skin Flayers? If you enlist, then I can definitely expedite your application." Huh? As soon as Bai Xiaochun heard the words spoken by Li Hongming, the sentimental feeling in his heart vanished, to be replaced by trembling fear. He didn't want to stay at the Great Wall for any longer than he had to. It was just too dangerous. He was about to shake his head in refusal, but realized that doing so would be a bit embarrassing. Sighing, he said, "I would love to join. Unfortunately, I'm well aware that the process of enlisting with the Skin Flayers is very complicated. I don't want to add any trouble to your busy life, Brother Li. One day, if I can do it completely on my own merit, then I'll definitely join the Hall of Steel Veins. Well then, I guess I'll be off now." Fearing that Li Hongming might do more to try to get him to stay, he turned to leave. However, before he could take a single step, a grave, somber voice echoed out through the air. "Do you really want to join the Skin Flayers?" Not only was the voice somber, but it was the weighty type that would apparently not tolerate the slightest bit of disobedience. Anyone who heard that voice would instantly feel shaken inwardly. Even as the voice echoed out, a middle-aged man appeared, clad in a long black robe. A moment ago, he had been some distance away, but a single step brought him to stand right in front of Bai Xiaochun, blocking his path forward. "Huh?" Bai Xiaochun said, his eyes going wide. Whoever this man was, he moved incredibly quickly, so quickly that before his words had finished entering Bai Xiaochun's ears, the man was already standing right there in his line of sight. He was handsome, with long black hair that made him quite dashing despite the fact that he seemed to be middle-aged. There was also something profound about him, as though his gaze contained the starry sky itself. A mere look at him left Bai Xiaochun shaken. Although his clothing seemed casually selected, the way he stood there made him seem as if he were fused with heaven and earth. He was not quite at the level of a diva in that regard, but seemed capable of reaching that level at any time. It was as if he could draw upon the energy of heaven and earth and transform it into boundless battle prowess. He was not in the diva realm, but neither was he in the great circle of the nascent soul stage. He had reached a point where he could understand some of the magical laws of heaven and earth, which meant that he was in the quasi-diva realm. Bai Xiaochun suddenly felt as if his breathing were stifled, and he couldn't even speak. Although what had occurred so far takes a bit of time to describe, all of it happened in the time it takes to say a short sentence. When Li Hongming saw who was now standing there, his expression turned profoundly solemn, and his eyes began to shine with fervor. Clasping hands, he bowed extremely deeply. "Greetings, General." Bai Xiaochun's heart immediately flip-flopped as he realized who this man was. Considering that Li Hongming had called him General, it meant that he was obviously the commanding general of the Skin Flayers. Bai Xiaochun immediately clasped hands and bowed. "Greetings, General." The black-robed man looked calmly at Bai Xiaochun and then said, "I just asked you if you really want to enlist with the Skin Flayers." Bai Xiaochun immediately regretted what he had just said. Seeing the black-robed general staring at him, he started to get nervous and stammered, Well, I don't." Before he could finish speaking, the black-robed man's eyes began to shine aggressively. A murderous aura suddenly exploded off of him, transforming into wave-like ripples of rage that threatened to capsize the tiny rowboat that was Bai Xiaochun. "Think your answer through clearly before you give it." Despite how calmly he spoke, the man's words echoed like thunder in Bai Xiaochun's mind. Bai Xiaochun felt an indescribable pressure weighing down on him, leaving him both trembling and literally on the verge of tears. His eyes were red, and he suddenly had the feeling that if he didn't agree to enlist, then he might be struck down dead on the spot. Swallowing hard, he said, I'm a hostage. It's kind of a sensitive position." "Hostage?" Looking surprised, the man waved his right hand, causing a jade slip to appear in his palm. After examining some information inside, he looked up in thought for a moment. Bai Xiaochun's heart was pounding with anxiety. He was completely convinced that he must not stay by the Great Wall, it was far too dangerous, and if he didn't leave, he would likely lose his poor little life. However, because of what was happening right now, his emotions were quickly devolving into complete despair. After a long moment of silence, the black-robed man put away the jade slip and said, "That doesn't matter. Since you wish to stay here, then I can resolve the issue of you being a hostage." Very well, the matter is settled. From this day on, you are a soldier in the skin flayers. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and seeing that the black-robed man was already turning to leave, he quickly cried, I'm a chosen. I'm in the top 10 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars. I'm free to do whatever I chosen, the man said, not even bothering to look back, his voice ringing with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. That's even better. Anger rising, Bai Xiaochun cried, I don't want to enlist. I take back what I said, alright? Taking it back won't do any good. You've been conscripted. Term of service, 10 years. The man stopped walking and then extended his right hand, within which appeared a violet command medallion, emblazoned with the terrifying, murderous sigil of the skin flayers. As a general of one of the 5 legions here at the Great Wall, I have the power to conscript anyone I want. Those were some nice medicinal pills you used yesterday, and will be of great use here. Let me put it his way, Bai Xiaochun. You're staying here, whether you want to or not. Flicking his sleeve, he looked over at Li Hongming. Li Hongming, sir. Li Hongming replied loudly, get him his uniform and then take him to the armory. With that, the man left, completely ignoring how Bai Xiaochun was reacting to all of this. Bai Xiaochun felt like weeping, but no tears would come. That was even more the case considering that as the black-robed man had spoken moments ago, a few dozen cultivators had appeared in the area, bristling with murderous auras. They were the type who had obviously fought in countless military campaigns, and had done so much killing that their eyes glowed red. The mere fact that they were looking at Bai Xiaochun left him jumpy. Clearly, if he refused to comply with the orders, they would not let him leave alive. Bai Xiaochun was both furious, and also filled with regret. He knew that all of this was the result of him trying to show off a bit. If I could take it all back, he thought, scowling on the verge of tears, I would never have jumped out into the limelight. Then, he looked at the back of the black-robed man as he headed off into the distance, and decided to throw caution to the wind. General, he shouted at the top of his lungs. His words echoed out like thunder, causing the eyes of the surrounding cultivators to grow even sharper than before. Li Hongming was clearly getting anxious, worried that Bai Xiaochun might do something to offend Bai Lin. He well knew that Bai Lin was the type of person who could slaughter both savages and cultivators without batting an eyelid. His rules for the Skin Flayers Legion were very strict, and thus, Li Hongming quickly tried to give Bai Xiaochun a meaningful look. Meanwhile, Bai Lin stopped in place for a second time. What do you want? He said, turning around slowly, his eyes as cold as ice. Bai Xiaochun immediately shivered as though he had suddenly been dropped into the dead of winter. He wasn't the only one to have such a feeling. Li Hongming and the other cultivators were suddenly trembling in their boots. Dejected by how terrifying the man's gaze was, Bai Xiaochun lowered his voice and said, if you want to conscript me into the skin flayers, that's fine. But you haven't told me what my salary will be. Li Hongming gasped in response. He knew that Bai Lin was a moody person, and if Bai Xiaochun provoked him in the wrong way, it wouldn't matter what his background was. If Bai Lin wanted Bai Xiaochun dead, then nobody in Great Wall City could stop him. You'll serve for 10 years, Bai Lin said coldly. Each year, your salary will be 5 times what you get in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. As for other rewards, you can acquire them using battle credit. With that, he turned to leave. General, Bai Xiaochun shouted. This time, Li Hongming was wailing inwardly at how brazen Bai Xiaochun was acting. Li Hongming himself would never dare to open his mouth a second time, were he in Bai Xiaochun's shoes. The other surrounding cultivators all felt the same. From what they could tell, this Bai Xiaochun really had some balls. As for Bai Lin, his murderous aura suddenly intensified by multiple levels. His hair began to fly around in the air as his aura raged out, causing brightly colored lights to flash in heaven and earth. As of this point, he looked like a god of death as he stared wordlessly at Bai Xiaochun, making the entire area seem more and more cold. The entire Skin Flayers district was now completely and utterly silent. Bai Xiaochun was trembling. The truth was that he didn't really want to yell out, but at the same time, he had the feeling that if he didn't make some demands now, he wouldn't get another chance later. Therefore, he steeled himself and said, I had 2 Dao protectors, both of them dear friends. They were in charge of keeping me safe. I'd really hate to be stuck here all alone. Is there any way you could send for them? Had Song Ke or Master God Diviner been there to hear his words, they would immediately have coughed up mouthfuls of blood, and instantly begun to curse him. To join the army that defended the Great Wall was like a death sentence, and anyone with sense would refuse to do so. Furthermore, there was no way that either of them could have imagined that after fleeing again, Bai Xiaochun would be trying to get them back. However, neither Bai Lin nor Li Hongming knew Bai Xiaochun very well, so to them, his words carried a different meaning. From what they could tell, Bai Xiaochun was worried that if he stayed at Great Wall City, his Dao protectors would probably go through a lot of trouble going around searching for him. Thus, in his attempt to care for them, he was asking that they join him. The fact that, despite being under such pressure and facing Bai Lin's murderous aura, Bai Xiaochun would still make such a request showed how much he valued friendship and loyalty. Bai Lin's expression immediately softened a bit. "I'm afraid that's not possible," he said. "However, I can promise that if you gain enough battle credit, then you can go find your two friends and conscript them yourself." With that, Bai Lin flickered into motion and disappeared, not giving Bai Xiaochun any more chances to say anything else. Face falling, Bai Xiaochun watched Bai Lin leave, then turned to look at Li Hongming. An odd half-smile appeared on Li Hongming's face as he looked back. Laughing lightly, he said, "Congratulations on attracting the attention of the General, Xiaochun. It's a big honor to have someone like him personally recruit you and vouch for you. In all the years that I've been in the army, I've only seen that happen to 3 people. You're the 4th. Bai Xiaochun immediately began to grumble to himself that he didn't want to become the 4th person to be personally conscripted by the general. However, he had no choice but to accept his fate, and thus, left with Li Hongming. As the side gate got further and further away, he couldn't help but feel like he had lost his freedom, his control over his life, and his chance to pursue his dreams. Why did things have to turn out this way? He thought, sighing continuously. Complaining inwardly the entire time, he followed along as Li Hongming took him to get his uniform, which was a suit of black armor. After changing into the armor, Bai Xiaochun realized that he looked quite heroic, and yet, that didn't make him feel any better than before. As they walked along, Li Hongming excitedly told him about the history of the skin flayers. Bai Xiaochun listened morosely as they head toward the location Bai Lin had indicated for him to be taken, the armory. What was referred to as the armory was a well-guarded area filled with numerous courtyard residences. Despite being a colonel, even Li Hongming was inspected thoroughly before being allowed inside. The armory is one of the most important locations in the Skin Flayers district. The only people who are allowed to live in this area are the Grand Masters who concoct medicine, create paper talismans, and forge weapons and armor. "Xiaochun," Li Hongming said with a sigh, "the general really did take a liking to you." Bai Xiaochun immediately sensed that the armory was somewhat different than the other areas outside. Not only was it more peaceful and quiet, but there was also somewhat of an accumulation of spiritual power. Something else that was strange was that all the cultivators in the armory seemed very arrogant. As Li Hongming proceeded along, he would clasp hands and salute, and yet they all completely ignored him in response. Seeing Li Hongming being given the cold shoulder made Bai Xiaochun a bit angry. "What's so amazing about these people?" he asked. Li Hongming laughed and replied, "Xiaochun, they're all Grand Masters. They're the people who make the tools we require to fight in battle. That's just the way things are." At that point, they stopped outside of the 7th building in the armory. "Xiaochun, this is as far as I can take you. From now on, we're fellow comrades in arms. If you need help with any issue, just let me know." After a few more words of advice, he turned and left. Bai Xiaochun sadly watched Li Hongming leave, then turned and stepped into the building which had been prepared for him. It was thousands of meters across, and other than a 3-story structure at one end, was mostly just a large courtyard neatly paved with green spirit stone slabs. Considering that Great Wall City as a whole was virtually devoid of spiritual energy, that made this location a wonderful place for any cultivator. Although Bai Xiaochun didn't really want to be stuck in Great Wall City, he had to admit that this residence wasn't too bad. He even saw a lovely little lake off to the side. Lakes were a rarity near the Great Wall, and any that did exist were filled with black water. Therefore, to see a lake like this one with cool, clear waters instantly left him feeling relaxed. "Ah well, I might as well just follow orders." Sighing, he walked over and sat down next to the lake, contemplating what was to come in the future. At that point, he noticed that there were 3 golden carp swimming back and forth in front of him. They had long whiskers that indicated they had lived quite a long time, and most shocking of all was that they were partially translucent. Clearly, they were not mortal tier creatures, and were the type of creatures that could be used as ingredients in medicinal creations. These dragonfishes must have lived for at least a 60-year cycle. That's pretty rare. They're the main ingredient for fish dragon pills. After watching the fish for a bit, he decided to go for a walk through the armory. Soon he realized that all of the buildings had numbers on them, and the smaller the numbers were, the larger the buildings. Furthermore, the locations of the larger buildings were also better. He was in Building 7, which was one of the best buildings in the entire armory. After examining the building records, he looked over at the little lake that now belonged to him and murmured, according to the records, there should be a whole school of dragonfish. Why are there only 3? Before he had time to think about the matter, his expression suddenly flickered as he looked over at a nearby wall. There, a figure was flying through the air, using some unknown method to circumvent the defensive spells and enter right into his courtyard. It was a gaunt old man with an arrogant expression on his face, and a cultivation base in the late core formation stage. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he noticed Bai Xiaochun, whereupon his eyes flickered in surprise. However, instead of saying anything, he simply walked over to the edge of the lake and, in plain view of Bai Xiaochun, reached into the water and grabbed one of the dragonfish. Then he turned to leave. Bai Xiaochun was stunned at how condescending the man was acting. Clearly, Bai Xiaochun was standing right there, yet the man pretended not to see him and then went so far as to grab one of his treasured fish. Bai Xiaochun had already been feeling depressed about being here, but now, his anger sparked. Hey, what do you think you're doing? He barked. Concocting medicine, the old man replied, not even bothering to stop. If the general wants to bully me, that's fine. But you think you can bully me too? As Bai Xiaochun's anger burned, his eyes shone with icy light. Reaching out, he made a grasping motion, simultaneously opening his third eye and sending violet light pouring out. The shocked old man attempted to flee, but was too late. In the blink of an eye, the dragonfish he had taken was snatched by Bai Xiaochun and thrown back into the lake. As of this moment, Bai Xiaochun realized that there really were less dragonfish in the lake than there should have been. Obviously, the others had been stolen, and likely, all by this old man. A very unsightly expression could be seen on the old man's face as he backed up a few steps. Glaring at Bai Xiaochun, he chuckled coldly and said, I've been living in Building 8 for years, and have never seen anyone as brazen as you. The dragonfish from Building 7 are mine for the taking. As for you, you trifling child, do you really think you can act so wildly in my presence? Bai Xiaochun had already been irritated to begin with, and the man's words only served to increase his irritation. Pipe down, he said, taking a step forward. Instantly, cracking sounds could be heard as frigid coldness spread out in all directions, causing layers of ice to build up everywhere. Then, he performed something like a minor teleportation, placing him directly in front of the old man. The old man's expression flickered, and before he could even think of fleeing, Bai Xiaochun punched out with the living mountain incantation. A force like an entire mountain slammed into the old man, who tumbled backwards several hundred meters, blood spraying out of his mouth. Screw off. From now on, all the dragonfish in this place are surnamed Bai. Although the old man's eyes flickered with venomous hatred, he didn't press the issue, and simply turned and left. Driving away the condescending old man lifted Bai Xiaochun's mood quite a bit, so he sat down next to the lake to meditate. Before long, evening had arrived. As the colors in the sky changed, Bai Xiaochun was just about to rise to his feet when he suddenly turned to look up into a different direction. A moment later, a few beams of light appeared, moving with lightning-like speed toward Bai Xiaochun. 3 figures approached, and in the lead was Bai Lin, clad in a black suit of armor, his face completely expressionless. Behind him were 2 old men with murderous auras and nascent soul cultivation bases, both of whom were clearly sizing up Bai Xiaochun curiously. Bai Xiaochun immediately stood up and said, Greetings, General. Have you gotten used to the environment in the armory yet? Bai Lin asked. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then carefully responded, It's all right, just a bit quiet, that's all. Having heard this, Bai Lin looked at one of the old men and said, Lin Dao, arrange for some handmaidens to care for Bai Xiaochun's daily needs. The old man nodded, pulling out a jade slip to send out some orders. Bai Xiaochun was a bit taken aback at how quickly his needs were being cared for. Just as he was considering what else he should say, Bai Lin looked down at the clear waters of the lake for a moment, then up into the sky. The Great Wall has existed for many years, he said. In fact, it's older than the starry sky Dao polarity sect itself. Do you know how many cultivators have been stationed in this city over the years? How many have fought here against the wildlands? Too many. The 5 legions of the Hall of Steel Veins have only been garrisoned here for the past 10,000 years or so. Generations come, generations go, people perish, people leave, but the Great Wall remains. Although there is a bit of rivalry between the 5 legions, overall, relations are good. We live up to our various areas of responsibility, guard the wall, and prevent the wildlanders from invading. Bai Xiaochun was having a hard time keeping up with what Bai Lin was saying, or at least, having trouble understanding what the point was. However, there was nothing else he could do but stand there and listen. The 5 legions all have a general and 10 major generals, Bai Lin continued. Each major general has 10 colonels beneath them, and so on, down to the lieutenants and the captains. As for me, I am the current general of the skin flayers. Bai Lin looked back at Bai Xiaochun, and his gaze grew even sharper than before. I'm not the type of man to mince words. I like to say things directly, and I always mean what I say. I have a strange personality. Some people say that I'm temperamental, and others say that I'm bloodthirsty. Some say that I will definitely become a diva someday, and others speak of my incredible natural-born talents. People call me brilliant, and say that I have a profound understanding of strategy and tactics. There are all sorts of such talk. I don't like it. I'm not interested in hearing those things, and in fact, there is only one thing that I like to hear people talking about. Do you know what that is? Considering how Bai Lin seemed to be blathering on so much, Bai Xiaochun had to admit that he really was quite weird. It almost seemed as if he were just randomly saying whatever came to mind. For example, what he had started talking about earlier seemed to have nothing to do with what he was talking about now. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun simply stood there blinking for a moment until Bai Lin frowned. I asked you a question. Do you know what I like to hear people talking about? From the look in his eye, he expected Bai Xiaochun to answer the question. No, Bai Xiaochun said, musing that this Bai Lin really was an odd fellow. Bai Lin's eyes flickered with cold light as he said, you know, I don't like it when people do things half-heartedly. Bai Xiaochun was cursing inwardly, and yet, Bai Lin's cultivation base was far higher than his own, so there was little choice. Therefore, he plastered a look on his face to make it seem like he was thinking very deeply. Then, after a long moment passed, he slapped his thigh. Eyes shining, he said, I know. Senior, in the future, you want people to look back and remember that there was once a cultivator named Bai Lin, a man who led armies across all creation, and who protected the Great Wall for his entire life. Bai Xiaochun was of the opinion that his flattery was flawless, and was actually starting to feel proud of himself, when he noticed that Bai Lin's expression had turned grim. Wrong, Bai Lin said, flicking his sleeve, his eyes beginning to shine brightly. I like people to talk about how Bai Lin has a wonderful grandfather. That is because my father's father ranks second only to the demigod patriarch in the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect. He is a diva grand elder. And what does that mean? That means that nobody in the entire Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect would ever dare to provoke me. Furthermore, I'm free to provoke anyone I wish. And beyond that, it means that I can dominate anyone and everyone in Great Wall City. It also means that the skin flayers have a profoundly shocking backer to rely on. From the day that I became the general of the skin flayers, I've had access to anything I wanted. If I lack a single thing, I simply make a request of the sect. In summary, the point of what I'm saying is that when you join up with the skin flayers, other than Diva Realm Senior Chen, there is no greater force to be reckoned with in this city than me. With that, he leveled a cool gaze onto Bai Xiaochun. Understand? Yeah, Bai Xiaochun said, staring in surprise at Bai Lin. Finally, he understood what the general had come here to do, which was simply to show off his family background. Of course, there wasn't much difference between that and the way that Bai Xiaochun often showed off. As for the senior Chen that he had referred to, Bai Xiaochun was aware that he meant Chen Yuxian's father, the three-eyed Chen Hichan. Bai Lin nodded approvingly. As for the two nascent soul experts flanking him, they had no expressions on their faces whatsoever, as if they had long since grown used to Bai Lin's personality and speeches. Sounding very serious, Bai Lin continued, well, now that you understand what I like to hear people talking about, you also understand that as long as you work for me, you can have anything you need. And you also understand what I want from you. I want your service. By this point, Bai Lin's eyes were beginning to shine with passion. I want you to work hard for our legion, to kill savages, to defeat vengeful souls, and to help us win more campaigns. That is why I conscripted you into the skin flayers. I want you to work hard at concocting medicine. Make medicines that can help us in our fight on the Great Wall. As long as you do that, you can have anything you want here in Great Wall City. In fact, I can even make things happen for you in the sect itself. For example, would you like the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect to open more slots for river-defying sect cultivators to come join the sect? Would you like your hostage status to be removed? Even if I can't personally make it happen, my grandfather can. The only requirement is your military service. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun, I want you to concoct that same medicinal pill you used before. I want lots of them. The more the better. And if possible, I want them to be even more powerful than before. Generally speaking, silk pants weren't anything to fear. Naturally skilled silk pants were, though. And even more fearful were ambitious silk pants. They were the most terrifying of all. Bai Xiaochun was actually a bit impressed by Bai Lin. However, considering they were both surnamed Bai, it was a bit annoying that Bai Lin had someone so powerful to rely on, whereas Bai Xiaochun himself didn't. Of course, Bai Lin's request was something Bai Xiaochun had assumed was coming. Furthermore, considering the things that tended to happen when he concocted medicine, he also figured it was probably good to at least mention that possibility at the outset. If he didn't, and something bad happened, then the next time he saw Bai Lin, the man would surely be furious. This wasn't the river-defying sect, where he could do just about anything he wanted. Nor was it the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect headquarters, with Du Lingfei there to make sure he was safe. He was now at the front lines of a war. He had seen how much fighting and killing went on beyond the Great Wall, and could sense the murderous aura that filled the entire city. He could well imagine how, if he caused some disaster, he would have a hard time protecting his poor little life, and would likely be left with no other choice than to flee the city. Therefore, he took a deep breath and gave Bai Lin a very serious look. "General, I can definitely concoct a lot of soul convergence pills for you. That's no problem at all. However, I invented that pill, and am familiar with the instabilities that can crop up during the concocting process. To be honest, not even I can truly explain why those things happen." Feeling a bit nervous, but not wanting to hide the truth, he continued, "If you want more powerful soul convergence pills, then I need to do more research and experimentation. I'm not saying that I can't do that, but I do have to point out that from the time I was very young until now, I always cause huge commotions whenever I concoct medicine." "That doesn't matter," Bai Lin said, waving his hand dismissively. "What could possibly go wrong when concocting medicine?" "I'm serious, General," Bai Xiaochun continued cautiously. "Back in the Spirit Stream sect, one of my pill concocting sessions caused acid rain to fall all over the whole sect. A lot of people had their clothes melted right off. Another time, a whole bunch of animals mutated. You can't even imagine how terrifying that was. Another time, I provoked lightning from heaven that destroyed my entire immortals cave. Later on, all the snakes in 10,000 Snakes Valley rebelled and invaded the sect because of me." The two nascent soul experts behind Bai Lin already looked a bit fearful. As for Bai Lin, he hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand dismissively again. "Those are just minor problems. Things like that won't hurt anybody." Looking a bit embarrassed, Bai Xiaochun said, "I'm not finished yet. Later on in the Bloodstream sect, my pill furnaces kept exploding, and one time I made this smoke that caused everyone on the mountain to come down with near-deadly diarrhea. And that's not even mentioning my fantasy pill, which gives people all sorts of crazy hallucinations. Oh, right, there was one time that I almost blew up an entire holy mountain." The two nascent soul experts with Bai Lin were actually major generals in the army, but even they were trembling in fear. The vivid descriptions provided by Bai Xiaochun sounded like nothing less than disasters, no matter how they analyzed them. The worst thing of all was that they could tell that Bai Xiaochun wasn't lying. He really was telling them of the consequences of his own medicine concocting. Bai Lin's eyelids twitched a bit, and he hesitated for even longer this time. But finally, he waved his hand even more forcefully than before. "It doesn't matter. You just take responsibility for getting those medicinal pills to the army. Whatever you need to do it, just ask. As for any problems which crop up during the concocting process, I'll take responsibility." At long last, Bai Xiaochun was able to breathe a sigh of relief. From what he could tell, now that he had offered an honest warning, if anything bad happened later, it wouldn't matter. Although, he murmured to himself, everyone who has said similar things in the past always ended up regretting it. Whenever he thought back to everything that had occurred with medicine concocting in his life up to this point, he always sighed. At this point, he realized that considering Bai Lin had said he could have anything he needed, he decided not to hold back out of politeness. "Okay, I need 100 of your best, most expensive pill furnaces. Each one must have been used to successfully concoct 30 batches of medicinal pills, should have high-quality medicinal aromas, and must all look identical. Otherwise, I would have to spend time getting used to each one, which would be a waste of time." After the briefest of moments, he added, "and, therefore, a waste of my military service." When Bai Lin realized that Bai Xiaochun wanted 100 pill furnaces, and had even more requirements beyond that, he hesitated for a moment. After all, the type of pill furnace being requested were very valuable. However, Bai Xiaochun's final added words were very convincing, so Bai Lin nodded in agreement and said, "No problem at all. I also need 10,000 high-grade earth flame crystals," Bai Xiaochun continued, not a single one of them lacking even an iota of earth flame power. "They need to be fully charged. By the way, that 10,000 is only for the first month. I'll need the same amount every month afterward. Simple, Bai Lin said, smiling broadly. As far as he was concerned, any requirements that could be solved by means of spirit stones weren't a problem at all. Seeing Bai Lin's casual reaction, Bai Xiaochun felt slightly irritated, and thus went on to say, I need fuel for 5-colored flame, 6-colored flame, 7-colored flame and 8-colored flame. Bai Lin hesitated, then gritted his teeth and said, I'll do my best. Plus 1,000 cloudy soul leaves. 1,000 earth spirit tubers. 1,000 atmosphere flowers. With that, he went on to name several dozen types of medicinal plants, any one of which could only be purchased via a sizable amount of merit points back in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. There were some that were only available for purchase to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity superstars, and even a few which were considered to be extinct. But Bai Lin considered himself to be incredibly rich, and after a moment of thought, agreed to all the demands. Despite racking his brains, Bai Xiaochun couldn't think of any other ingredients or items he needed, so decided to change tactics a bit. Oh right, concocting medicine is very draining on one's energy and cultivation base, and will be even worse considering the surroundings. If you want me to work without resting, then I need some supreme-grade spirit alcohol to keep my cultivation base going. Bai Lin immediately let out a hearty burst of laughter. You got it. However, only a moment later, his eyes shone with a cold light, and his murderous aura began to pulse dangerously. However, although I can give you everything you've asked for, when it comes to what I want, if you fail to, flicking his sleeve, Bai Xiaochun interrupted proudly to say, no ifs. When it comes to concocting medicine, when Bai Xiaochun says that he can do it, he definitely can. Bai Xiaochun couldn't have anyone questioning his ability to concoct medicine, after all. Bai Lin seemed taken aback, and yet, didn't get angry. In fact, a broad smile could be seen on his face. He respected people with skill, and Bai Xiaochun seemed completely confident in his abilities. As such, Bai Lin could only assume that he truly was very skilled at concocting medicine. Furthermore, Bai Lin wasn't worried about any so-called disasters. After all, no one in Great Wall City would dare to provoke him. On the other hand, if Bai Xiaochun didn't end up concocting the medicine, then Bai Lin would make sure he reaped the harsh consequences of lying. Laughing, he looked at Bai Xiaochun and said, very well. You'll get everything you need within 3 days. If there's anything else you require, say the word. The only thing I care about is that you succeed in the end. After a moment of thought, Bai Xiaochun looked over at the wall leading to Building 8. Not only had the old man from that building casually stolen his property, he had also given him a very dirty look. Earlier, he knew that, as a newcomer, it would be wisest not to cause any problems that might have negative ramifications later. But now that he realized how important soul convergence pills were to Bai Lin, he decided that he might as well add in one last requirement and see how Bai Lin handled it. Eyes narrowing, he said, I'm afraid my courtyard isn't large enough to contain all 100 pill furnaces, and that old guy over in Building 8 offended me earlier. Bai Lin seemed surprised, and looked at Bai Xiaochun deeply for a moment. You know, Bai Xiaochun, the more requirements you add on, the less room you have for failure. Very well. Henceforth, Building 8 belongs to you. As for Grandmaster Chen, you won't see him for the next 10 years. Furthermore, before he could finish speaking, an intense rumbling roar could be heard from beyond the Great Wall, something so loud that the whole city seemed to shake. Bai Lin's pupils constricted, and Bai Xiaochun's heart instantly began to pound in shock. Everyone looked over in the direction of the Great Wall, and could see that, at some unknown point, the clouds in the darkening evening sky had formed a huge vortex. The vortex was so large that it was impossible to even see the end of it, and pouring out of it, like prisoners escaping from a jail cell, were endless numbers of vengeful souls, all of whom were furiously charging in the direction of Great Wall City. The vast number of souls was enough to make anyone's scalp go numb. They seemed evil and ferocious to the extreme, and a few of the unfortunate cultivators from the 5 legions who happened to be outside the wall dispatching some enemies were pounced upon and instantly reduced to desiccated corpses. How could this be happening? Someone's using some type of grand magic to tap into the underworld river. With that, Bai Lin shot with lightning-like speed toward the Great Wall. Bai Xiaochun gasped, and once again realized that the intense sensation of deadly crisis he was feeling right now was just how life was at the Great Wall. The flames of battle could rage at any time. After a long moment, he exhaled slowly, more conscious than ever that his soul convergence pill could probably be very useful on the battlefield. Thankfully, he was very familiar with how to concoct soul convergence pills, and since all he had to do was make them a bit stronger, was confident that it wouldn't be extremely difficult. After all, he only needed to adjust the pill formula a bit. He had been devoted to the Tao of medicine for years, and had even concocted a river-defying pill, so he had absolute confidence in being able to add bit of strength to a trifling soul convergence pill. Despite that, he still felt a bit nervous, not because of the pill itself, but rather, the strange things that often happened when he went about his concocting work. However, Bai Lin had unequivocally guaranteed to take responsibility, so therefore, Bai Xiaochun felt a bit better. Considering the level of his Tao of medicine, there was no saying that he would even cause any problems at all. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun was very excited, and decided that Great Wall City actually wasn't a very bad place after all. Bai Xiaochun, end up being like a shining star wherever I go. It's not like I want to be that way. Humming a little tune, he swaggered back into his residence. The next day, a large group of cultivators entered Building 8, and Bai Xiaochun soon heard bellows of rage coming from Grandmaster Chen. However, such cries soon faded away, and less than 2 hours later, the wall between Buildings 7 and 8 had been torn down. In the end, the two courtyards were connected, and a new spell formation put in place. As of this point, Bai Xiaochun's residence was about twice the size as it had been. The limestone flooring in the two courtyards was connected, and soon, more spiritual energy than before could be detected. Although it was still rather weak, to anyone else in Great Wall City, it would be a luxury. In fact, the only other type of people who would have access to so much spiritual energy would be major generals. When Bai Xiaochun emerged from his residence and looked out at the expansive courtyard, he felt quite satisfied. From what he could tell, no one in the same generation as him could possibly have a finer immortal's cave. Not bad at all. Despite being very happy, he did feel that the place was a bit empty. However, that afternoon, one of the major generals in the skin Flayers arranged for about a dozen handmaidens to come over and help take care of the place. At that point, Bai Xiaochun felt that everything was perfect. Of course, the fact that Bai Xiaochun had moved into the armory, and that the day after, Grandmaster Chen had been kicked out of Building 8 by the skin Flayers, was news that shocked all of the other Grandmasters. The residents of the armory were all famous cultivators, and although none of them were really close friends with each other, when they saw the aggressive way that Bai Xiaochun threw his weight around, they weren't very happy. Let's see how long things last for this kid. HMPH. General Bai Lin of the skin Flayers only cares about results. If this Bai Xiaochun doesn't make him completely happy, he's definitely going to be furious. The more Bai Lin gives you, the worse things are if you fail. This kid is a complete idiot. He's definitely going to be dead sooner rather than later. Bai Xiaochun was unaware of how the other grandmasters in the armory were talking about him, but whenever he went out for a walk, he could sense their coldness. HMPH, he muttered. I can't help but feel that my residence is still a bit too small. Another day went by. Around evening, Bai Xiaochun went for another stroll, and when he came back, his eyes immediately began to shine. There in his courtyard were 100 pill furnaces, neatly lined up, each one of them fully 3 meters tall. Standing in front of the pill furnaces was one of the same major generals who had come to visit him with Bai Lin a few days before. The old man was flanked by 4 youths, all of whom were staring wordlessly at Bai Xiaochun. The pill furnaces were greenish-black, and were all identical, carved with auspicious qilins. They all emanated powerful auras as well. Furthermore, despite the fact that furnaces weren't being used to concoct anything at the moment, they were surrounded by a strong medicinal aroma. Hurrying forward excitedly, Bai Xiaochun quickly began to inspect the furnaces, after which his eyes shone brightly. He actually did get me 100 pill furnaces, all of them tier 3 at that. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.